The classified briefing room at Naval Air Station Oceana fell silent at 3:47 hours on a Tuesday morning that would redefine everything the Pentagon thought it knew about aerial warfare. Admiral Marcus Whitfield, a man whose chest bore more ribbons than most museums display flags, stood frozen before a projection screen showing satellite imagery that shouldn't exist. The photos, captured by a reconnaissance drone over the South China Sea just 18 hours earlier, revealed something impossible. A single FA-18F Super Hornet maintaining perfect formation with a squadron of Chinese J-20 stealth fighters, not in combat, but in what appeared to be coordinated flight. The aircraft's tail number was clearly visible, 166,673. Every person in that room knew that number belonged to a jet that had been shot down 3 months prior during a classified mission over disputed waters. The pilot had been listed as missing in action, presumed dead. Her personal effects had been shipped home to a small town in Montana, where her mother still left the porch light on every night. What made the image even more disturbing was the radio chatter intelligence had intercepted during the same time frame. A female voice, speaking perfect Mandarin with what linguists described as a native Beijing accent, coordinating tactical maneuvers with Chinese pilots using call signs that matched known People's Liberation Army Air Force squadrons. The voice analysis came back with a 97% match to Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Kestrel Thorne, daughter of a decorated Air Force colonel, graduate of the Naval Academy's top 5%, and holder of 3 distinguished flying crosses. Admiral Whitfield's hands trembled imperceptibly as he studied the photograph. Kestrel had been his protege, the pilot he'd personally recommended for the most dangerous missions because she possessed something rare in military aviation: the ability to think like the enemy while maintaining unwavering loyalty to her country. Her call sign hadn't come from any macho tradition or inside joke among squadron mates. It came from her uncanny ability to hover motionless in aerial combat, waiting with the patience of a hunting bird before striking with lethal precision. The room's occupants, intelligence officers, Pentagon liaisons, and senior naval aviators, waited for their commanding officer to speak. Outside, the pre-dawn darkness pressed against reinforced windows like a physical weight. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of jet engines warming up for morning training exercises created a low, continuous rumble that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. The implications were staggering. If Kestrel was alive and flying with enemy forces, it represented either the most sophisticated defection in modern military history or something far more complex and dangerous. The woman they'd known as one of their finest pilots might now be their greatest threat. 3 months earlier, Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Thorne had been leading a routine patrol mission designated Bravo 77 when her squadron encountered what intelligence later classified as an unidentified aerial phenomenon. The official after-action report stated that Kestrel's aircraft experienced sudden mechanical failure and crashed into international waters during a storm system that made immediate rescue operations impossible. Her wingman, Lieutenant Jake Fury Rodriguez, had maintained radio contact for exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds before Kestrel's transponder went dark. The last words anyone heard from her were characteristically calm. "Fury, I've got multiple system failures. Hydraulics are gone, engines running rough. I'm going to try to make it to the emergency coordinates, but if this bird goes down, tell my mom I kept the blue side up as long as I could." What the official report didn't mention was the strange radar signature that had appeared moments before Kestrel's distress call. A signature that didn't match any known aircraft in either American or foreign inventories. It moved with impossible speed and agility, seeming to phase in and out of detection like something from science fiction rather than modern warfare. Fury had been debriefed 7 times by different intelligence agencies, each session more intense than the last. He maintained his story with unwavering consistency, Kestrel had been flying normally when her instruments began registering impossible readings. The unknown contact had appeared on radar for exactly 93 seconds before both it and Kestrel vanished from all tracking systems simultaneously. The search and rescue operation that followed involved two carrier strike groups, multiple Coast Guard cutters, and satellite reconnaissance that covered nearly 10,000 square miles of ocean. They found debris consistent with an FA-18F crash, including a piece of the aircraft's vertical stabilizer bearing the correct serial numbers. Analysis confirmed the metal had been exposed to salt water for the appropriate duration and showed impact damage consistent with a high-speed collision with the ocean surface. Kestrel's family had held a memorial service at Arlington National Cemetery 6 weeks after she was declared missing in action. Her mother, Helena Thorne, received the flag that had covered her daughter's symbolic casket with the same dignity she'd shown throughout 30 years as a military spouse. The ceremony was attended by over 200 active-duty personnel and veterans who had served with or under Kestrel's command. Admiral Whitfield had delivered the eulogy personally, speaking of a pilot who understood that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. He talked about her dedication to her squadron mates, her innovative tactical thinking, and her unwavering commitment to the oath she'd sworn to defend the Constitution. He did not mention the classified aspects of her final mission or the questions that kept him awake at night. Now, staring at satellite imagery that challenged everything they thought they knew about that tragic day, Whitfield found himself questioning not just the circumstances of Kestrel's disappearance, but the fundamental assumptions underlying their understanding of modern aerial warfare. The briefing room's air conditioning hummed with mechanical persistence, but sweat beaded on the Admiral's forehead as he contemplated the possibilities. Either their intelligence apparatus had failed catastrophically, or something far stranger than a simple aircraft malfunction had occurred over those disputed waters 3 months ago. The satellite images showed more than just Kestrel's aircraft flying alongside Chinese fighters. Enhanced analysis revealed modifications to her Super Hornet that appeared to incorporate technology that didn't exist in any known military inventory. The aircraft's profile had been altered with additions that resembled nothing in current aerospace engineering databases. Whatever had happened to Kestrel, she hadn't simply survived a crash and been captured by enemy forces. Intelligence Officer Captain Miranda Cross stepped forward, her voice cutting through the room's tension like a blade through silk. "Sir, we've identified the location where these images were captured. It's approximately 400 nautical miles southeast of the coordinates where Lieutenant Commander Thorne disappeared. The Chinese squadron was conducting what appeared to be advanced tactical training exercises, but their flight patterns don't match any known People's Liberation Army Air Force doctrine." Cross activated a laser pointer, illuminating specific details on the projection screen. "Notice the formation structure here. The aircraft are flying in a configuration that maximizes both offensive capability and mutual protection, but it requires a level of coordination and trust that typically takes months to develop. Either Kestrel adapted to their tactics with extraordinary speed, or she's been working with this unit for significantly longer than 3 months." The implications sent a chill through every person in the room. If Kestrel had been collaborating with foreign military forces before her disappearance, it would represent a security breach of unprecedented magnitude. Every classified mission she'd flown, every tactical briefing she'd attended, every piece of sensitive intelligence she'd been exposed to would be compromised. Admiral Whitfield's voice, when he finally spoke, carried the weight of command decisions that could reshape global military strategy. "Captain Cross, I want every aspect of Lieutenant Commander Thorne's service record examined with maximum scrutiny. Personnel files, psychological evaluations, financial records, personal communications, travel history, everything. And I want it done quietly. If word of this leaks before we understand what we're dealing with, it could trigger a diplomatic crisis that makes the Cold War look like a minor disagreement. The room's occupants began moving with the practiced efficiency of military professionals facing a crisis that demanded immediate action. Laptops opened, secure communication devices activated, and the machinery of intelligence gathering shifted into high gear. But beneath the professional competence, an undercurrent of personal betrayal ran through every conversation. These were people who had served with Kestrel, who had trusted her with their lives and their secrets. The possibility that she had deceived them challenged not just operational security, but their faith in their ability to judge character and loyalty. Captain Cross returned to her position at the head of the conference table, her expression reflecting the same mixture of professional determination and personal confusion that marked everyone present. "Admiral, there's one more thing." The voice analysis of the intercepted communications revealed something unusual. While the speaker demonstrates native-level fluency in Mandarin, there are subtle linguistic patterns that suggest the language was learned through intensive training rather than childhood acquisition. It's possible we're dealing with someone who received sophisticated language instruction for the specific purpose of deep cover operations. The revelation added another layer of complexity to an already bewildering situation. If Kestrel had been trained in advanced language skills without the knowledge of her commanding officers, it suggested either a level of personal initiative that bordered on insubordination or involvement in operations, so classified that even senior naval intelligence officers weren't cleared to know about them. Whitfield moved to the window, gazing out at the flight line where aircraft that Kestrel had once flown sat in neat rows, their wings gleaming under the harsh illumination of sodium vapor lights. Each of those machines represented millions of dollars in technology and thousands of hours of training by pilots who trusted their commanders to use their skills wisely and their lives carefully. The sound of his own breathing seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet that had fallen over the briefing room. Outside, the first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the eastern horizon, painting the sky in shades of gray that reminded him of gun-metal and uncertainty. "Gentlemen, ladies," he said without turning from the window, "we're going to proceed on the assumption that Lieutenant Commander Thorne is alive and operating with unknown motivations in a highly sensitive theater of operations. Our primary objectives are to determine her current status, understand the circumstances that led to her apparent collaboration with foreign military forces, and assess the potential damage to national security. This operation is classified at the highest levels, and anyone who discusses these matters outside this room will face court-martial proceedings." The weight of command had never felt heavier on his shoulders. Somewhere out there, beyond the curve of the Earth and the reach of their immediate influence, one of their own was flying missions that could reshape the balance of power in the Pacific. Whether she was acting as a patriot engaged in the deepest of cover operations, or as a traitor who had sold her loyalty to the highest bidder, remained to be determined. But Admiral Whitfield knew one thing with absolute certainty. Before this crisis concluded, he would have answers, regardless of how much those answers might cost in terms of careers, relationships, or international stability. The hunt for Kestrel was about to begin, and it would test everything they thought they knew about loyalty, sacrifice, and the price of serving something greater than oneself. Captain Cross began distributing folders containing preliminary intelligence assessments, each document stamped with classification markings that restricted access to fewer than 50 people worldwide. The papers contained detailed analysis of radar tracks, communication intercepts, and satellite imagery that painted a picture of aerial operations unlike anything in the historical record of military aviation. The Chinese J-20 fighters that Kestrel appeared to be flying alongside represented the cutting edge of People's Liberation Army Air Force technology. These weren't export models sold to allied nations or older aircraft that might have fallen into foreign hands through military aid programs. They were frontline fighters equipped with the most advanced avionics, stealth capabilities, and weapons systems that Chinese military industry could produce. For an American pilot to be flying in formation with such aircraft suggested either capture and coercion under extraordinary circumstances, or voluntary cooperation that implied motivations far more complex than simple defection. The tactical precision displayed in the satellite imagery indicated that whoever was flying Kestrel's aircraft had achieved a level of integration with the Chinese squadron that would be impossible to fake or accomplish under duress. Intelligence Officer Lieutenant Commander Patricia Voss, who had joined the briefing halfway through the initial presentation, raised her hand to address the room. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the flight patterns shown in these images, and there's something that doesn't match standard Chinese tactical doctrine. The formation structure incorporates elements that appear to be derived from NATO training protocols, specifically techniques that were developed during joint exercises between American and Allied air forces." The revelation struck the room like a physical blow. If Kestrel was sharing American tactical knowledge with foreign military forces, the implications extended far beyond a single pilot's defection. NATO's aerial combat doctrines represented decades of tactical evolution, refined through actual combat experience and intensive training programs that involved the most sensitive aspects of Allied military cooperation. Admiral Whitfield turned from the window, his expression reflecting the gravity of a situation that seemed to grow more complex with each new piece of information. "Lieutenant Commander Voss, what's your assessment of the potential intelligence damage if NATO tactical protocols have been compromised?" Voss consulted her notes before responding, her voice carrying the clinical precision of an intelligence professional delivering unwelcome news. "Sir, if Lieutenant Commander Thorne has shared comprehensive knowledge of NATO aerial tactics with foreign military forces, we're looking at an intelligence disaster that could require fundamental revision of alliance combat doctrines. Every joint exercise, every coordinated operation, every tactical advantage we've developed through international cooperation would be vulnerable to countermeasures." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Modern military aviation depended heavily on international cooperation, with Allied air forces training together regularly to maintain interoperability and shared tactical understanding. If those cooperative relationships had been compromised, it would affect not just American operations, but the combat effectiveness of democratic allies around the world. Captain Cross activated another series of satellite images, these showing the same general area of the South China Sea, but captured at different times over the past 6 weeks. "Admiral, these additional photos suggest that the formation flights we've observed aren't isolated incidents. Our satellite analysis indicates regular training exercises involving the same aircraft and personnel, which implies a level of operational integration that would require extensive preparation and planning." The photographs revealed a pattern of activity that contradicted every assumption about Kestrel's disappearance. Rather than being the result of a sudden catastrophic event followed by capture or coercion, the evidence suggested systematic preparation for long-term operations in collaboration with foreign military forces. Admiral Whitfield studied the chronological sequence of images, noting details that painted an increasingly disturbing picture of systematic preparation and coordination. The aircraft modifications visible in the latest photographs appeared to represent ongoing development rather than hasty battlefield adaptations. Someone had been planning these operations for months, possibly longer. "Captain Cross, I want you to coordinate with the National Security Agency to analyze all electronic communications in this region for the past 6 months. Look for any patterns that might indicate advanced planning or coordination related to these operations. And I want a full review of Lieutenant Commander Thorne's access to classified information during the year preceding her disappearance." The investigation was expanding beyond simple questions of loyalty or survival into fundamental questions about the security of Allied military operations and the effectiveness of personnel screening procedures. If Kestrel had been planning collaboration with foreign forces while maintaining her position as a trusted American military officer, it represented a failure of security protocols that could have implications extending far beyond her individual case. Outside the briefing room windows, the sun had risen enough to begin illuminating the flight line with the golden light of early morning. Aircraft maintenance crews were beginning their daily routines, performing the careful inspections and preparations that kept military aviation functioning with the precision that modern combat operations demanded. The irony wasn't lost on Admiral Whitfield that while his personnel were working to maintain the highest standards of military professionalism and security, somewhere across the Pacific, one of their former colleagues might be using that same professionalism and training in service of objectives that remained completely unknown. The hunt for answers was just beginning, and every new piece of information seemed to raise more questions than it resolved. But one thing was becoming increasingly clear. The woman they had known as Kestrel was far more complex and potentially dangerous than anyone had imagined. The secure telephone in the corner of the briefing room rang with the distinctive tone that indicated a call from the Pentagon's highest levels of command. Admiral Whitfield answered on the second ring, his voice maintaining the professional composure that 3 decades of military service had ingrained as second nature. Admiral Whitfield, this is General Patricia Morrison, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I understand you have a situation that requires immediate attention at the highest levels of command. The conversation that followed lasted exactly 11 minutes and resulted in the classification of Operation Kestrel Hunt as a priority alpha intelligence gathering mission with presidential oversight. Within 6 hours, resources that included the most advanced surveillance satellites, elite special operations units, and international intelligence cooperation agreements would be focused on understanding what had happened to Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Thorne and what she might be doing now. As the briefing room emptied and the initial shock of discovery gave way to systematic intelligence gathering, Admiral Whitfield remained at the window, watching aircraft take off for routine training missions that suddenly seemed far more precious and vulnerable than they had appeared just hours before. Somewhere out there, Kestrel was flying missions that could reshape everything they thought they knew about loyalty, survival, and the complex motivations that drove people to serve something greater than themselves. Whether she was acting as a hero engaged in the deepest of cover operations, or as a traitor who had abandoned everything she had once sworn to protect remained to be determined. But Admiral Whitfield knew one thing with absolute certainty. Before this investigation concluded, he would have answers that would either restore his faith in the military personnel he commanded or force him to question everything he had believed about duty, honor, and the price of serving one's country in an increasingly complex and dangerous world. The satellite imagery continued to stream in from intelligence assets positioned around the globe, each new photograph and radar track adding pieces to a puzzle that seemed to grow more complex with every attempt at solution. Captain Cross coordinated the analysis with the systematic precision that modern intelligence work demanded, but beneath her professional competence lay the same questions that troubled everyone involved in the investigation. How well had they really known Kestrel? What motivations drove someone to abandon everything they had sworn to protect? And what did her apparent survival and collaboration with foreign forces mean for the security of Allied military operations around the world? The answers to those questions would determine not just the fate of one missing pilot, but the future of international military cooperation and the trust that held democratic alliances together in an increasingly uncertain world. As morning turned to afternoon, and the investigation expanded to include intelligence assets from around the globe, one fact became increasingly clear. Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Kestrel Thorne had become the center of a mystery that would test everything the military establishment thought it knew about loyalty, survival, and the complex motivations that drove people to serve causes greater than themselves. The hunt was just beginning, and the answers it revealed would reshape military aviation doctrine, international intelligence cooperation, and the fundamental assumptions underlying modern national security operations. Captain Cross's voice cut through the afternoon stillness that had settled over the briefing room as additional intelligence personnel arrived to support the expanding investigation. Admiral, we've received confirmation from NSA that electronic intelligence gathering assets in the Pacific Theater have been redirected to support Operation Kestrel Hunt. We should begin receiving comprehensive communications intercepts within the next 4 hours. The machinery of American intelligence gathering was shifting into high gear, focusing resources that were normally spread across global operations on a single question. What had happened to one of their own? And what was she doing now that she was apparently alive and flying with foreign military forces? Admiral Whitfield nodded acknowledgement of the report while continuing to study the latest satellite imagery. Each new photograph seemed to reveal additional details that deepened the mystery rather than providing clarity. The modifications to Kestrel's aircraft were unlike anything in existing aerospace engineering databases, suggesting either access to classified technology programs or collaboration with military-industrial capabilities that extended far beyond simple defection to foreign forces. Captain, I want you to coordinate with the Defense Intelligence Agency to review all classified aerospace development programs for the past 5 years. Look for any technology that might explain the modifications we're seeing to Lieutenant Commander Thorne's aircraft. And I want background checks on every person who had access to those programs. The investigation was expanding beyond questions about a single pilot into fundamental questions about the security of America's most advanced military technologies. If Kestrel had gained access to classified aerospace developments and was sharing that information with foreign forces, the implications could reshape the global balance of military power. As the sun began to set over Naval Air Station Oceana, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded everyone present of the colors worn by their missing comrade, Admiral Whitfield knew that they were facing a crisis that would test everything they believed about loyalty, duty, and the price of serving something greater than oneself. The hunt for Kestrel was about to enter its most intense phase, and the answers it revealed would determine not just the fate of one missing pilot, but the future of American military aviation and the international alliances that kept the world's democracies secure. Somewhere out there, beyond the curve of the Earth and the reach of their immediate influence, Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Kestrel Thorne was flying missions that could reshape the balance of power in the Pacific. Whether she was acting as a hero engaged in the deepest of cover operations, or as a traitor who had abandoned everything she had once sworn to protect remained to be determined. But one thing was becoming increasingly clear. The woman they had known as a dedicated military officer was far more complex and potentially significant than anyone had imagined, and the mystery of her disappearance and apparent survival would challenge everything they thought they knew about modern warfare, international relations, and the complex motivations that drove people to serve causes greater than themselves. The investigation would continue through the night and into the days that followed, drawing resources from across the American intelligence community and allied nations around the world. But already, even in these early hours of discovery, it was becoming apparent that Operation Kestrel Hunt would become one of the most significant military intelligence investigations of the modern era. The answers it revealed would reshape not just individual careers and operational procedures, but fundamental assumptions about loyalty, survival, and the price of serving something greater than oneself in an increasingly complex and dangerous world, where the lines between friend and enemy, hero and traitor, duty and betrayal were becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish. As darkness fell over the naval air station and the investigation entered its next phase, Admiral Whitfield remained at his post, coordinating resources and analyzing intelligence that would determine the fate of one missing pilot and potentially reshape the future of military aviation around the world. The hunt for Kestrel had begun in earnest, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Secure Communications Center at Naval Air Station, Oceana, buzzed with activity that extended far beyond normal operational tempo as intelligence analysts from multiple agencies worked to coordinate the most comprehensive search for a missing pilot in modern military history. Banks of computer monitors displayed satellite imagery, radar tracks, communication intercepts, and data analysis that represented the focused attention of America's most sophisticated intelligence gathering capabilities. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Voss had been working for 14 straight hours, coordinating with intelligence assets across the Pacific Theater to build a comprehensive picture of aerial activity in the region where Kestrel had disappeared and apparently reappeared. Her analysis revealed patterns of flight operations that extended far beyond the simple training exercises that Chinese military forces claimed to be conducting in international waters. "Admiral," she reported during the evening briefing, "we've identified at least 37 separate instances of unusual aerial activity in the target region over the past 3 months. The flight patterns don't match any known Chinese Air Force doctrine, and they involve aircraft configurations that our aerospace intelligence specialists can't fully explain." The revelation confirmed Admiral Whitfield's growing suspicion that they were dealing with something far more complex than a simple defection or capture scenario. The systematic nature of the operations suggested long-term planning and coordination that would have required extensive preparation and resources that extended beyond the capabilities of any single military unit or intelligence organization. Captain Cross activated a wall-mounted display showing a three-dimensional representation of the South China Sea region with flight tracks overlaid in different colors to represent various aircraft types and mission profiles. The pattern analysis indicates systematic testing of advanced tactical concepts that incorporate elements from multiple national Air Force doctrines. It's as if someone with comprehensive knowledge of international military aviation is conducting experimental operations that combine the best aspects of different tactical approaches. The implications were staggering. If Kestrel was involved in developing new aerial combat doctrines by combining knowledge from multiple military traditions, she wasn't simply sharing American secrets with foreign forces. She was actively working to advance military aviation in ways that could reshape the global balance of power and render existing defensive strategies obsolete. Admiral Whitfield studied the display with the focused attention that 3 decades of military service had taught him to apply to complex tactical problems. The flight patterns showed a level of innovation and tactical thinking that reminded him of Kestrel's approach to aerial combat during her service with American forces. She had always been willing to challenge conventional wisdom and experiment with new approaches that maximized both effectiveness and survivability. "Captain Cross, what's your assessment of the personnel requirements for operations of this scope and complexity? How many people would be needed to support systematic testing and development of advanced aerial tactics?" Cross consulted her analysis notes before responding. "Admiral, based on the frequency and complexity of the observed operations, we estimate involvement of at least 40 to 60 personnel, including pilots, aerospace engineers, intelligence specialists, and logistical support staff. This isn't a small-scale defection or capture scenario. It represents systematic collaboration between multiple organizations with significant technical and financial resources." The briefing room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't dealing with a single missing pilot who had been captured or coerced by foreign forces. They were confronting evidence of systematic international collaboration on advanced military technology development that involved their own personnel and potentially compromised some of America's most sensitive aerospace capabilities. Outside the briefing room windows, the night sky was clear enough to see stars that reminded everyone present of the navigation training they had received as young officers learning to find their way across vast distances using celestial references that had guided military aviation since its earliest days. But the stars offered no guidance for navigating the complex political and military implications of what they were discovering about Kestrel's disappearance and apparent survival. Intelligence Officer Commander Sarah Martinez entered the briefing room carrying a folder of documents that bore classification markings restricting access to fewer than 20 people worldwide. Admiral, we've received confirmation from the National Reconnaissance Office that deep space surveillance assets have detected aircraft operating in the target region with propulsion signatures that don't match any known military or civilian aircraft types. The revelation added yet another layer of complexity to an investigation that already challenged fundamental assumptions about military aviation and international security. If the aircraft that Kestrel appeared to be flying incorporated propulsion technology that wasn't in existing databases, it suggested either breakthrough technological developments or access to classified programs that extended far beyond conventional military research and development. Admiral Whitfield accepted the classified folder and reviewed its contents with the systematic attention that handling sensitive intelligence required. The technical analysis contained within the documents described propulsion characteristics that appeared to combine conventional jet engine technology with supplementary systems that produced unusual electromagnetic signatures and performance capabilities that exceeded the theoretical limits of known aerospace engineering. Commander Martinez, what's the assessment from our aerospace technical intelligence specialists regarding the feasibility of the propulsion systems described in these reports? Martinez consulted her briefing notes before responding with the clinical precision that intelligence work demanded. Sir, the technical analysis indicates that the observed propulsion characteristics are theoretically possible using advanced materials and engineering approaches that are currently being researched in classified programs at multiple aerospace contractors. However, the timeline for developing such systems from research concept to operational deployment would typically require at least 5 to 7 years of intensive development work. The timeline implications were profound. If Kestrel was flying aircraft equipped with advanced propulsion systems that required years of development, her involvement in whatever operations she was conducting must have begun long before her official disappearance 3 months earlier. The investigation was revealing evidence of planning and preparation that extended far beyond anything they had initially imagined. Captain Cross activated additional displays showing comparative analysis of radar signatures, performance characteristics, and operational patterns that painted an increasingly complex picture of advanced military technology development. Admiral, the evidence suggests systematic testing and refinement of aerospace technologies that represent significant advances over currently deployed systems. This isn't simply a matter of sharing existing knowledge with foreign forces. Someone is actively working to develop entirely new capabilities that could reshape military aviation. The implications extended far beyond questions about a single missing pilot into fundamental questions about the future of military aviation and the security of advanced technology development programs. If American personnel were involved in developing revolutionary aerospace technologies in collaboration with foreign forces, it represented either an intelligence failure of unprecedented magnitude or a classified operation so sensitive that even senior military commanders weren't cleared to know about it. Admiral Whitfield moved to the secure communication console and began the process of contacting the Secretary of Defense to request authorization for expanded intelligence gathering operations that would include some of the most sensitive surveillance capabilities available to American military and intelligence agencies. The investigation was reaching a point where normal operational procedures and classification protocols would need to be elevated to the highest levels of government oversight. As he waited for the secure connection to be established, Whitfield reflected on the career of the pilot at the center of this expanding mystery. Kestrel had always been exceptional in her ability to think beyond conventional approaches to aerial combat and mission planning. Her tactical innovations had earned her recognition and advancement through the ranks, but they had also marked her as someone who was willing to challenge established procedures when she believed improvements were possible. The question that now dominated his thoughts was whether her apparent survival and collaboration with foreign forces represented the logical extension of her innovative thinking, applied to international military cooperation, or betrayal of everything she had sworn to protect in service of motivations that remained completely unknown. The secure telephone connection activated with the distinctive tone that indicated direct communication with the Pentagon's highest levels of command. "Mr. Secretary, this is Admiral Whitfield at Naval Air Station Oceana. I need to brief you on developments in the Thorn investigation that have significant implications for national security and may require presidential-level oversight." The conversation that followed lasted 27 minutes and resulted in the authorization of Operation Kestrel Hunt Alpha, a maximum priority intelligence gathering mission that would deploy the most advanced surveillance and analysis capabilities available to determine the full scope of activities surrounding Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Thorne's disappearance and apparent collaboration with foreign military forces. As the investigation entered its most intensive phase, Admiral Whitfield knew that they were approaching answers that would either restore confidence in military personnel security procedures or reveal systematic failures that could require fundamental revision of how America protected its most sensitive military technologies and international intelligence relationships. The hunt for Kestrel was about to reveal truths that would reshape military aviation, international security cooperation, and the fundamental assumptions underlying modern national defense strategies. Whether those truths would vindicate or condemn the pilot at the center of the mystery remained to be determined, but their implications would extend far beyond the fate of any single individual. Somewhere across the Pacific, Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Kestrel Thorne was flying missions that incorporated technology and tactics that could revolutionize military aviation. Whether she was acting as a patriot engaged in the most sensitive of classified operations, or as a traitor who had sold her knowledge and loyalty to foreign forces, would soon be determined by an investigation that was mobilizing resources from across the American intelligence community. The answers would reshape everything they thought they knew about loyalty, duty, and the price of serving something greater than oneself in a world where the boundaries between cooperation and betrayal, innovation and treason, heroism and treachery were becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish. The investigation continued through the night and into the dawn of what would become one of the most significant days in the history of military intelligence gathering, as resources from around the globe focused on understanding the mystery of one missing pilot, whose apparent survival and activities could reshape the balance of power in the modern world. Admiral Whitfield remained at his command post, coordinating an investigation that would test everything he had learned about leadership, loyalty, and the complex motivations that drove people to serve causes greater than themselves in an increasingly uncertain and dangerous world, where the old certainties about friend and enemy, duty and betrayal, were dissolving into shades of gray that challenged every assumption about military service and national security. The hunt for answers was reaching its critical phase, and nothing would ever be the same again. 24 hours after the initial discovery of satellite imagery showing Kestrel flying with Chinese military forces. The investigation had expanded to include intelligence assets from 7 allied nations and surveillance capabilities that represented the most advanced technology available to democratic governments around the world. The Secure Operations Center at Naval Air Station Oceana had been transformed into a coordination hub for intelligence gathering operations that extended from low Earth orbit to the depths of the Pacific Ocean. Captain Cross stood before a wall of displays showing real-time intelligence data flowing in from sources that ranged from spy satellites to submarine-based electronic surveillance platforms. Admiral, we've achieved comprehensive coverage of the target region. Every aircraft movement, every radio transmission, every electronic signature in a 400 square mile area around the coordinates where Lieutenant Commander Thorne disappeared is being monitored and analyzed in real time. The technological resources focused on understanding Kestrel's situation represented an investment of millions of dollars in surveillance assets and hundreds of hours of analysis by some of the most skilled intelligence professionals in the world. But despite the comprehensive coverage, the mystery seemed to deepen rather than resolve with each new piece of information. Lieutenant Commander Voss approached the command console carrying a folder of analysis reports that reflected 18 hours of continuous work by technical specialists trying to understand the propulsion and performance characteristics of the aircraft that Kestrel appeared to be flying. Admiral, the technical analysis has reached some conclusions that I need to brief you on immediately. The modifications to Lieutenant Commander Thorne's aircraft appear to incorporate technology that isn't just advanced, it's revolutionary. Admiral Whitfield accepted the technical reports and reviewed their contents with growing amazement and concern. The analysis described propulsion systems that appeared to operate on principles that challenged conventional understanding of aerospace engineering, achieving performance characteristics that exceeded the theoretical limits of known technology by significant margins. Lieutenant Commander, what's the assessment from our technical specialists regarding the origin of this technology? Is it possible that it represents classified American development programs that we weren't aware of? Voss consulted her briefing notes before responding with obvious reluctance. Sir, we've checked with every classified aerospace development program in the American military-industrial complex, and none of them are working on technology that matches what we're observing. The propulsion characteristics and performance capabilities suggest either breakthrough scientific developments that haven't been shared with our technical intelligence specialists, or access to technology that originates from sources outside conventional military research and development. The implications were profound and disturbing. If Kestrel was flying aircraft equipped with technology that exceeded anything in American military development programs, it suggested either international collaboration on advanced aerospace research that had been conducted without the knowledge of senior military commanders, or access to technological capabilities that originated from sources that remained completely unknown. Commander Martinez entered the operations center carrying an urgent message folder that bore priority markings indicating direct communication from the White House Situation Room. Admiral, I have a priority message from the National Security Council. The President has been briefed on Operation Kestrel Hunt Alpha and is requesting immediate assessment of potential implications for national security and international relations. The investigation had reached the highest levels of government attention, drawing presidential oversight for what had begun as a routine investigation into a missing pilot. The expansion of political interest reflected growing recognition that they were dealing with something far more significant than individual questions of loyalty or survival. Admiral Whitfield reviewed the National Security Council communication and prepared his response with the careful attention that direct presidential oversight demanded. The questions from the White House reflected sophisticated understanding of the military and technological implications surrounding Kestrel's apparent survival and activities, suggesting that senior policymakers were beginning to grasp the potential significance of what the investigation was revealing. Commander Martinez, please prepare a comprehensive briefing package for transmission to the National Security Council. Include all technical analysis, intelligence assessments, and operational recommendations. The President needs to understand that we're dealing with developments that could reshape military aviation and international security relationships. As the investigation continued to expand and draw resources from across the American intelligence community, Admiral Whitfield found himself reflecting on the personal dimensions of the crisis that extended far beyond questions of technology and international relations. Somewhere across the Pacific, a pilot who had once served under his command was engaged in activities that could determine the future of military aviation and global security relationships.